Okay, great. So welcome everyone. We're really excited to have you all here today. This is the Association for Mathematical Research and the Practical AI for the Working Mathematician. I don't know what we want to call this. Maybe it'll turn into a series where we go around and ask other people how they are interacting with AI in their everyday lives. But at first, let's just get started with the very first one. So we're very happy to have, my name is Alex Kontorovich. We're very happy to have Professor Rob Ghrist from UPenn. And we're just going to dive right in and start talking about how Rob's been using these systems. Rob, do you want to say anything before we get going?
Let me just introduce myself a
Please.
little bit. My name is Robert Ghrist. I'm a professor of mathematics and electrical and systems engineering at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm also the undergraduate dean for the engineering school here, and I've been involved with the AMR since the beginning. And hi. Alex, you got some questions for me?
Yes, I couldn't hear the last tail end of that. I don't know if that's my Wi-Fi or yours. It might be Zoom struggling with so many people joining us, but um, hopefully we won't have problems going forward.
Hopefully.
So one thing I definitely wanted to discuss with you is the experience I heard you describe recently of writing a 300-page book in 55 days from start to finish. Can you say more about how that came about and
Sure thing. Happy to. Let me mention that I expect the conversation here to go to a bunch of different places. I think there are a lot of ways in which AI impacts how we as mathematicians do our job, and that's everything from research to administration to teaching. One aspect that I've been playing around with, exploring, is in using AI to augment my writing. I've done this in a couple of different ways. Sometimes it's, I'm hanging out with my PhD students and they're working at the board, and I take a picture of the board, upload it to ChatGPT and say, LaTeX this. It's actually pretty good at that. One of the experiments that I started at the beginning of November was related to book writing. I just got done teaching for an hour and a half in the new linear algebra for AI course that we are piloting for first and second year students here in engineering at Penn. It's a brand new course. This is sort of the first semester that we've got a real audience for it, and it needed a textbook. I wanted to do things in a specialized way. It's a specialized course. It usually takes me about 2 years at least to write a textbook. So I decided at the beginning of November to see how quickly I could speedrun a textbook project with AI tools. Played around with some stuff, tried this, tried that, managed to get what I think is a halfway decent looking 300-page book done in exactly 55 days. It hit Amazon and the web on December 28th, I think. If you don't mind, let me share my screen just so
please?
that you can take a look. This is the PDF. I put up the link to this PDF on X, on Twitter, a couple of weeks back. I don't have the link handy, so you have to take a look at it. You can see it's latex, so it looks clean. It's not a bad looking book. It goes to lots of different places. This is the chapter on the SVD. It's got exercises, it's got examples, it's got all these sorts of things. Everything, all of it is co-written using AI. What do I mean by that? Most of you probably use ChatGPT or have played around with it. That's one of many different AI platforms that are available. For this for this textbook writing project, I used an AI called Claude. This is by Anthropic. If you've played with it, you know that it is a very good writer. It's just got this emotional sort of aspect to it that is a little bit different than the cold, canonical ChatGPT. You could use either platform or other platforms to augment your writing. Let me just show you a little bit of what I built to set this up. I built what is called a project inside of Claude, where I have some custom instructions. Project instructions mention what this text is about. It mentions a little bit about my philosophy, and it identifies some of the files that are set up. Let me read this one line to you. In your knowledge files are attached a JSON file with an analysis of my writing style. I'm an eclectic writer with a style and vocabulary forged of a life spent reading classic literature, blah, blah, blah. There's another file that is LaTeX rules. There are also a couple of secret things as well. Might talk about that later. This file, writing style, what I did was I uploaded a collection of my writings, papers, other books, things like that, to Claude, asked it to analyze the writing style and compress it down into a format that it can easily read. JSON seemed like a good format. You could use text, whatever. It was a little daunting to see what Claude thought of me as a writer, but there it is. That's me. And after uploading this and asking Claude to write something, it kind of reads like me, kind of sounds like me. Claude is especially good at this kind of stuff. Besides a current draft of the LaTeX document for the book, I also had a collection of rules, basically a whole bunch of LaTeX macros. Please do it this way, don't do it this way. And it respects that. It follows that. So if I scroll down through some of the sessions that I would have with Claude, what I would do is I would say, hey, you know what? It's time to go through this particular section of the text. I'm going to have to scroll way back to when I was writing stuff. Here is the conversation that I had for drafting up section 13.1 in the chapter on neural networks. And I'm saying, hey, it's time to draft this up, following the outline and the style of the rest of the text. Let's proceed. I had already worked out a really careful outline of what should be in that section. It was able to take a look at it, and what it did is it opened up what in Claude is called an artifact. In ChatGPT, it's called a canvas, and it outputs to raw LaTeX that I can very easily copy and then paste into my LaTeX processor, which was an overleaf document. Now, what would happen typically is that it would write something and I would say, I'm reading through that. Could you improve it a little bit? Draft up a little marginal note with this example that I would like. Sometimes these conversations would go on for some time, and I would say, no, the flow of this is all wrong. The key to getting good output here is not to say, hey, write me a book or write me a chapter. You have to work in small chunks, small sections. It's really good at telling a nice, coherent story and following the rules, as long as the conversation doesn't go too long because of the limited memory that these systems have. Now, this elicits the whole local to global problem. If I have a bunch of different conversations where it's writing a bunch of different sections without going through and integrating everything together, what then do you do? This requires different sessions where you feed in an entire chapter and say, you know what? I feel like the flow of this is not so coherent. I want you to make a list of suggestions on how to improve this in order to make the narrative more coherent, in order to make it flow better. And then it would go back, make a list of suggestions. I could say, yes, implement these, not this one, not that one. Give me a rewrite. And maybe I have to break it up into a couple of chunks.
So if I understand correctly, if you're having a conversation, then every time you query it, you're sending the entire conversation in the context yet again and yet again and again. So when the conversation gets long, this is when first of all it starts to complain that you're using a lot of your tokens, and second of all it just, I mean, this is what you're saying, if I understand correctly, that there's this tension between you want it to have a lot of the context because that's when it'll give you the best answer, when it's understood the entire conversation. But there's a cost to that. And so you have to balance it. This is what you mean by breaking things up into small sections.
Exactly. And I was constantly struggling with the line of, oh, this conversation has gone on too long and starting to lose the thread here. Let's hit reset, start over. It's a little weird having these conversations where, it's forgotten what you've been doing for the past hour. That is one of the things that is going to change in the next year. But for now, this is a limitation that we have. For really large jobs, what I would have to do was upload the entire document to an AI that has a bigger, what's called context window, bigger memory. The biggest out there right now is Google's Gemini, which, depending on the version you use, has a context window of either 1 million or 2 million tokens. To give you an idea of how much that is, this entire 300-page book in LaTeX was less than 10% of that context window. So I could feed the whole book in and say, hey, read this through from start to finish and point out any instance where I've used notation or I've used terminology without defining it yet. That's the kind of thing that when you're writing a book, it's awful. I mean, it's just terrible. Because it's quadratic in the length of the document. That Gemini did a really good job on that one, and Claude would not be able to handle it all.
You're using combinations. You're playing with which one is better for which application and putting a discussion from one into the outcome of a discussion of one into another and having it run a query there.
Exactly. And your mileage may vary. You may gravitate towards one or the other. For me, I'm constantly bouncing around from one AI platform to the next. I found that Claude was just a great co-author. It got what I was going for. It understood me, or at least that's how I feel. And Gemini was just good for chunking through power, 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 just big, big, big chunks of text. ChatGPT was so good with technical issues, all the LaTeX formatting, getting the macros to work right, getting the all the PDF stuff to work out right to resolve conflicts. ChatGPT was great for that. But again, you got to play around with these things and find out which aspects work best for you.
There's a question in the chat about whether there's a Claude extension for common LaTeX editors like TechMaker or VS Code. I know I'm not sure if the question is referring to an extension where you can query it or something like an autocomplete, like a Copilot. But you want to respond to either of those?
Yeah, so I'm not aware of a dedicated plugin that will help. And Copilot is a separate thing that I've not spent enough time with. I do know that Claude has integrated some LaTeX rendering so that you can actually see some math formulas just sort of render correctly when you're having a conversation with it. That's down in the settings. You have to turn that on. That is not on by default. That, interestingly, I think that came to be because there's an employee at Anthropic who started off life as a mathematician. I think they were in algebraic geometry. And they've done a thing or two to make Claude more friendly to mathematicians.
But in your own experience, you just interact exactly in the window that you were showing us just over the web browser.
That's right. And the key is to get it to output to just raw text in what in Claude is called an artifact. In ChatGPT, this is called a canvas. There's a number of different ways to get it to output the LaTeX code that you might need.
Usually you just ask something in tech and it'll automatically generate an artifact. Is that right?
That's right. Sometimes you gotta be a little bit insistent.
There's another question about whether you used free or paid versions, and if paid, at what level.
I consider it an occupational expense to pay for just about everything. I have paid versions of Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini. Yeah,
And these are like $20 a month each or something. So
that's right.
it's
It's worth it. There is a new level for ChatGPT that's $200 a month. I wasn't excited about paying that, but I figured to prep for this, I should put it through its paces. So I laid out $200. Might cancel it. We'll see.
there's a question from Lev. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess I've been trying to write a book and I'm using AI in certain ways, but I'm hesitant to have it actually co-write in any way because if it generates passages, unless I completely reword it, um, it might generate from other textbooks, and that's plagiarism. I mean, not definitions of simple definitions, but sometimes words. And then you can't say, "Oh, AI wrote it for me" as a defense, nor should you. And so, how did you prevent that? Or are you worried there's like a paragraph in your book that someone will say, "Oh, it actually appears in another textbook," and.
That's a valid concern. The way that I dealt with that was that in my custom instructions at the project level, I said everything has to be written in my voice with my style. And of course, I went through and read everything and made a whole bunch of edits. Although 95% of the time, those edits were at the meta level, saying, I don't like this part here. It sounds too formal. Lighten up a bit. Or, you're getting sloppy here. Go back and tighten this up and make sure you reference these other definitions and actually use the label and formally mention things like that. There was enough back and forth in what I was doing that for me, you know, it's not that it's impossible that there's a paragraph that is in the training data from somewhere else, but thinking probabilistically, yeah, this is an original work.
So
A lot of people, if I can keep going for a second, a lot of
please.
people are, sort of nervous about the idea of, well, if you have the AI assisting you in this way, then are you even the author? And the way that I frame it to myself is more in terms of being the director. This is very much what it felt like in those 55 days writing this, where I had a team of people working for me and I was directing them. And I had the vision, the artistic vision, the thing I wanted to see. And the people working for me were very skilled and very industrious, but I was delegating and telling people what to do. If you see a uh, a Steven Spielberg movie, it's a Spielberg movie. You call it a Spielberg movie, even though he's not running the camera, he's not necessarily doing all the writing, he's not doing all the color grading, all the audio, but he's absolutely in control of teams of people who are doing this. That's my view.
So in your experience, you would not, I mean, you could, there's editing at the level of you go into back into Overleaf, forget about Claude, and you don't like a paragraph and you rewrite it yourself. Or alternatively, you grab that paragraph, paste it into Claude and say, here's a paragraph that I don't like so much. Let's work on it, rewrite it. So you're suggesting you were doing more of the latter.
That's right. Within Claude, it's really easy. You can actually just highlight a paragraph within the artifact and say, could you improve this? Could you change this? I don't like it. And it'll come up with something else. Or you can give it more specific instructions.
And those first things that you fed it, like do things in my voice and in my style, That's something that gets sent every single time you have, you sort of have a block. It's like prompt engineering. You have a block that's been engineered to prompt it to, hey, remember we're talking about this book. So that every time you restart it, is that correct? Every time we restart it.
That is correct. With the paid version of Claude or ChatGPT, it allows you to build what are called projects, where you can give it system level instructions. This may be available on the free version. It didn't used to be, but things are changing so quickly, I can't keep track.
There's another question about which document class did you use? Did you choose which one, or did you ask Claude to suggest some good-looking document classes, or you have your standard ones from other books that you've written?
You know, I just went to Overleaf and yanked one off the shelf. This was the Tufte book class. There were a bunch of things I didn't like about it, but it's a really complicated class file. So I just fed it to ChatGPT and had it start hacking it until it looked the way I wanted it to look. ChatGPT was great for really technical LaTeX questions.
There's another question. I'll just read it verbatim. I often ask an LLM something like, say it better with 3 to 5 variants, and then you have several options and you can choose the part that you like. Is that a technique you employed?
Love it. That's a great technique. Yep.
Let's see. There's another question from Pavel. Do you want to unmute and ask your question? Let's see if I see Pavel.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So the question was, did you feed in any notes by you or did AI generate all content? And if AI generated all content, well, this is a book on a basic subject, but what would be the difference if you were to write an advanced book about research topic?
These are some excellent questions. So there were multiple layers of creation. The first was coming up with an outline. For that, it was a lot of back and forth between me and Claude, where I would say, oh, suggest an outline for this. And it would come up with exactly the same standard thing. And I would say, no, 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 no. For me, the heart of linear algebra is the fundamental theorem of linear algebra. And I want to inject some of my perspectives in there. So we talk about the co-image, the co-kernel without using inner products. It's all at the abstract level. It's kind of like first isomorphism theorem kind of thing, although I'm not saying that because these are first and second year undergrads. But there's definitely a very personal vision that I take towards the heart of this. The applications as well are very much influenced by me and not the standard sorts of things. It has a strong orientation towards neural networks and AI. So there was definitely a ton of me saying, no, 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 don't do it that way, do it this way. When writing with Claude, I found that we would sometimes get into fights. We were good collaborators, but we would sometimes fight because it would always keep trying to go back and assume that there's an inner product and talk about orthogonal complements. And I would say, no, 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 you're not allowed to do that. Use the quotient spaces the way I said. Follow the themes, the outlines, stuff like that. We would always get into that. So yes, it'd be really easy to just say, no notes, just one shot it, make me a book on X, where X is a sort of a standard subject. There's lots of stuff out there. And you would get, you know, some melange of whatever is out there. The art is in having a personal vision and then injecting it, guiding it to do that, much in the same way that a director of a film is imposing their personal vision on a team of people who, left to their own devices, might create something good, but, you know, maybe somewhat standard or disjointed.
So can I ask, maybe I can restate a version of Pavel's question, which is, this was a book with an original vision, but on a topic on which there's been much written. And can you guess how successful such an experiment would be if it was on a topic like can you write research papers this way, where it can't know what you want it to say, because no one knows what you want to say, because no one has proved this theorem before.
That is an entirely different subject, one I would love to pivot to. Before starting this textbook project, I did another experimentation of trying to get existing AI tools to assist both with proving a new result and even conjecturing a new result, and then writing that up into a paper. This was something that I did between August and October of 24. It began just playing around on my phone, talking to Claude, talking to ChatGPT about some idea that I'd thought about a long time ago, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that. And just going with it back and forth. Yeah, what do you think about this? Oh, this would be cool. And it came up with a conjecture that I saw it and I'm like, oh, I should have thought of that. It's a really good idea. I wonder if that's true. And so I asked it to prove it. And it came up with a proof, just like that. It was, of course, wrong. But instead of saying, oh, this is trash and throwing it away, I tried again with a different AI platform. And it was also wrong in the proof. And it was wrong in the same way. This is very interesting. So I took the wrong proof from the one guy and sent him to the other guy and said, hey, could you analyze this proof, see if there are any mistakes? And he found a mistake. And so I said, well, can you come up with a different way to do it? And he came up with a different way to do it. And it was wrong, of course. And I spent about, I don't know, 5-6 weeks just playing around with this. Meanwhile, two of my PhD students got interested in these experiments that I was doing, and they were sort of interested in the conjecture. And so they just went off and proved it, organically. But I was very careful not to share their proof with any of the AIs that I was doing. I played dumb. And I tried and tried over and over, and it kept going down the same false paths after wandering around. It was as if I was mapping out some subspace in the space of all possible proofs, scare quotes on the proofs. And it kept getting stuck in this subspace. It could not break out. And it could not break out into the direction where there were correct proofs. Until one day, OpenAI came out with their new O1 model. And I had my prompts all set up. The day I got access to it, I fed my prompts into GPT-01. I said, here's a conjecture. Try to prove it. And it started going down the same paths. And so I said, nope, here's a mistake. There's a mistake here. You got that inequality backwards. And then it did something amazing. It said, well, I'm going to have to come up with something totally new. And it came up with a totally different idea, something I had not seen before, which eventually we verified was correct. And it was different than the way that my PhD students had done the proof. I'm not saying it's the most elegant or optimal proof. It's maybe not the proof that would be in the book, but it was a pretty good proof. All three of us were kind of surprised.
And so you saw that in the O1 model. That's when it first, this was before Sonnet 3.5 or something?
No, this was in the time of Sonnet 3.5, and it could not get it. It could not get it. Claude could not get it. Gemini could not get it. GPT 4.0, pardon me, could not get it. Yeah.
Interesting. So
would you like to see what happens when we feed it into to a new system?
Oh yeah. Just one last question before we go to that.
Sure.
You were saying you have your various prompts that you try out. So do you keep them organized, or do you just use the built-in, the fact that it has a history of what you asked?
No, I have a folder of text files where I keep prompts that I use for trying to prove things. Because if you just feed it the conjecture and say, prove this, you're not going to get high quality results. It's good at thinking, and I would even argue it's really reasoning, but it needs instructions on how to do so properly. We as mathematicians are so trained into how to approach a proof, what to do, what not to do, what pitfalls to avoid, how to validate what we've done. The large language models don't have that culture baked in. They need to be reminded how we do things. If you don't mind,
Yeah, please.
I'd like to show you a thing or two. Let
As
me.
you open it up, I'm wondering, has anyone published, or, mathematicians are all open source. We put everything on the archive and so on. Has anyone released like useful prompts they found help put a general LLM into a state of good quality theorem proving?
I haven't seen any publications to that end, but if if you ask me where do I get my information from, I go to X or Twitter. Ethan Mollick is a professor at Penn in the Wharton School. He's always putting out great information on prompt engineering. Not for mathematicians necessarily, but really good stuff. Shared on the screen is the text file that I used for trying to prove a certain result. This is, it's kind of like a variation of the max-flow-min-cut theorem from network theory, a type of duality, but instead of being valued in real numbers, it's valued in a category of order lattices. So whatever, don't worry about the actual conjecture, it's the prompt. I'm telling it, before you get started, list all the relevant definitions. For each mathematical tool you plan to use, explain its relevance, and then think through some creative ways to approach the result first. When you're working on the proof structure, present a high-level outline first, break it down into logical steps, give details, do verification, pay special attention to all the technical bits, and then do a final verification, check that the assumptions were necessary and sufficient, and then, when completed, rewrite that proof from start to finish in a clear yet compact style of a mathematics research journal. Again, this is kind of like what you would say to a really talented student who just doesn't know what to do in terms of writing a proof. You have to be very, very explicit.
And did you write this, or did you collect this from a conversation with AI?
Oh, I told Claude what I wanted to do as far as proving a thing, and I said, write a prompt that will instruct an LLM into how to approach this. Absolutely.
So they're even writing the prompts that will help them figure out the way to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't mind,
yeah, please.
One of the things that I did this weekend was check out the new DeepSeek R1 model, which, if you have not tried this yet, this is amazing. This is from DeepSeek.com, which is a Chinese company that has just recently put out an AI model that is as good, if not better, than the best that is currently available.
Sorry, go on.
And if you log into that using your Google credentials, let's say, be very careful what you upload to it. If you click on this button here that says Deep Think, then when it gives you its output, it will show you its thought processes. So I'm going to take this prompt, this very long prompt. I'm going to copy it in here. And again, I've given it a conjectured result, and I'm asking it to go through this very long and complicated process. When I put this into OpenAI's top-of-the-line model, it takes 10 minutes to produce the results. It's going to take a couple of minutes to produce the results here. And I apologize that the writing is a little bit tiny. I'm going to try and blow this up. But take a look at what this thing is doing. Okay, let's tackle this step by step. First, I need to understand exactly what the theorem is stating. It says that blah, 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 blah. You can see its internal thought processes translated into English that we understand. And oh my gosh, I spent all weekend playing around with this, and it is really thinking the way that I or one of my students thought through this problem. And it says things like, you know, I'm not sure. Maybe I could do this multiple times. Maybe I could do it that way. Now, I'm trying to one-shot this, right? I haven't set this up with a thing where I know exactly what it's going to say. And there's a probabilistic component to it. But let's scroll down and see how it's struggling through this. And it's definitely struggling. Ooh, this seems too simple. Did I make a mistake? Well, let me rephrase. Let's try this. And when I ran it this weekend, it did a lot of going down false paths and then coming back and reevaluating before, in the end, getting to an absolutely beautiful, correct proof of this non-trivial result. And this,
So at this point, you're not actually interacting. This is all just one, you asked one prompt, and this is all it continuing to respond to that prompt.
yes. And what it's doing right now is it's coming up with a simple example and then checking to see if it can find a counterexample. This is absolutely fantastic. Now, again, this thing just came out recently, and the fact that this company was able to train their model on something that's an order of magnitude cheaper than what OpenAI or Anthropic was using, that's the thing that's crashing the stock market today. Oops. But this is actually really, really amazing because it means we're going to get these reasoning models and things much, much better than this that can run locally, even on a phone. We're going to get that eventually. You're going to have a reasoning army of PhD AI students who can work through problems for you. And again, it's probably going to take upwards of 5 to 10 minutes to get through this. I hope it converges to a correct proof the way it did this weekend when I tried it out. That is the state of the art right now. And this really makes me optimistic about the use of AI tools in actually helping us do research. Now, I'm somewhat lucky in that this result that I found, look, it's not the Riemann hypothesis, right? It's not that deep and difficult. I think a good PhD student is going to be able to get this no problem. But it's not something that is in the literature. It's not in its training data, and it's not an obvious thing to do. It's just sort of on the line between what is provable and what is not provable, just using raw language model with some careful prompt engineering.
Can I ask a couple of things? This is a free version?
This is absolutely free. That's the thing that is crashing the market today. You
And
do not have
moreover,
to
they
pay
open
for
sourced their model?
They have open sourced their model. You can download the weights and run it locally.
So let me see if let me ask a slightly technical question, which maybe will expose my ignorance. So there's the model, and then there's the chatbot that's built on top of the model.
That's
And
right.
the model is saying, you know, given this context, what's the next token? And it iterates that until the token it sees is stop talking. And then that's when it gives you a chance to ask another query. So they've open sourced the model. Have they also open sourced the chatbot that sits on top of the model and actually does the interaction? Or is that?
So yes and no. You can go to Hugging Face and just download everything and set it up to run locally. with a chat interface. But this thing that I'm showing you, this is the sort of web portal
Right.
for a centralized model, right? Everything that you do is heading over to China and then coming back. There's an app, you can run it on your phone. Again, that's centralized, but being open source, you can download this model, build a local version, and have a chat that is completely without internet access.
Is it possible that, like the O1 model says, I'm thinking, but it's not actually showing you what it's thinking, it just shows you the answer. So is it possible that O1 is actually doing the same thing as this DeepSeek under the hood, just not showing you all of it, and they've made the decision here to actually show it?
That is certainly what is happening.
Yeah. So maybe it's, would you say it's that different from O1, or just the fact that it's free and open source is what's crashing the market, not that it's so different from what O1 has done?
The thing that changes everything is the fact that they trained this model using a platform that is an order of magnitude cheaper than what OpenAI was using. No need for stacks and stacks and stacks of NVIDIA chips.
And when you download the model from Hugging Face and try to run it locally on your machine, that's not the computationally intensive component that runs on your hard drive.
You do need some decent computational capability to be able to run it, because it's not a tiny model, but it's doable. You can run it on a local system.
You don't need a stack of H100s or something to.
You do not.
Whereas the training they've done for you, they're giving you the weights, they're giving you the outcome of that computation.
That is correct.
Fascinating. So you're saying, I mean, okay, these systems have been trained on trillions of data points. They have billions of parameters, and I guess they've discovered that a lot of that was high dimensionality that you can pare down to a much smaller dimensional space and still get largely the same kind of performance.
DeepSeek released a research paper, I think it was a month ago. You can read the tricks that they implemented in order to make this work.
Did they start with something like Llama, some already open sourced AI from another company?
I believe that that is the subject of a great amount of speculation.
Okay. That's great. We have some more questions. Let's see, Dan Romick, do you want to unmute and ask your question? I see Dan here. Let me try to read Dan's question. There's a approach or prompting in the AI community known as chain of thought, which has been discussed in literature, but not in the context of higher level math. And there are lots of papers in the other contexts. And I guess there's a suggestion that you publish a paper about, there's the book, okay, you've published the outcome, but maybe also I think it would be very interesting to see a paper that really discusses, here's how the process went, and here were the prompts and so on. I guess that's how I'm interpreting Dan's question.
So for the result that I alluded to, where I'm showing the DeepSeek model thinking through it, I and my two students did write up that result along with a whole bunch of interesting applications of the result that we used AI to help generate. And then the way it's up on the archive is it's just a straightforward applied math paper, but with a detailed appendix that shows the process of how we used AI to get this, what models we used when, what tools were helpful.
So it's already there, you're saying, in this,
That's right.
documented it.
Paper's been up on the archive since October.
Yeah. There's another question. Andrew, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
No. I just would like to say that, I'm not sure how it is possible to say that AI can actually do anything new in mathematics, since AI, at least at this moment, is mostly about copying other people's work, and that's the primary application. So there are lots of text which are used in training, and then we can just extract the knowledge from this text. So as long as this is in the data set, we can find the answer to that. So the question whether AI can prove something is, is like, is this proof in the data set? This is that complicated question. So this is just a comment about whether AI can do this or that. AI can do anything what is in the data set. This is just text-to-text transformation. So I'm not exactly sure what this discussion is about. If AI can have proof of anything which is in the data set. That's
I
it.
think what we're seeing is that it's able to discover proofs outside the data set. So maybe I'll let Rob.
Yeah, but at this moment, this is very limited, and okay, but there are some instances of that, but at least based on my experience, this is really unimportant at this moment. But okay, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, the way to answer this is to experiment, play around. I would encourage anyone who's sort of wrestling with that issue to play around with the DeepThink model and just ask it some math questions and take a look at how it's reasoning through, and then make up your own mind.
Yeah, but I did a lot of experiments, especially with coding. So if the code is like longer than 2 pages, it's terrible. Any AI which I use. So at least at this moment, this is at least my experience. So so there are some, maybe some results which are some particular, but in general, well, it doesn't look like it's widely applicable for new things. It is very effective for standardized questions, and so I think it's very good for education. But for new things, well, at least at this moment, I don't see it like that. But okay, I am probably wrong.
I'll tell you from my own experience, having heard Rob talk about how great these systems are. Just last week, I was doing something with hyperbolic three manifolds, and I was dreading the thought that I would actually have to code up some Mathematica file to do some complicated calculation. And I decided to try out an experiment where I put into Claude and explained to it what I wanted done. And I sort of fed it the tick-Z. This is LaTeX commands that draw Coxeter diagrams. So it's like abstraction on top of abstraction. And it immediately said, oh, yes, I see that these two dihedral angles are pi over 3, and these two are pi over 2, and you have this corner at infinity, and things that are geometric, things that I actually have to look at the thing and look at the nodes. And so I was absolutely floored. I do not understand what is the mechanism by which something that's trained on language and next token has what I know that it doesn't really have a model in its brain of geometry, but somehow it pretends to, and almost convincingly. So I will say that when I was asking it to write this code, I mean, I can also read the code and see what it's outputting, but some of it was in using functions in Mathematica that I'm not familiar with. So I would just take the code and put it in and see what picture I got out. I know what picture I expect to see. And I would say about 70% of the time it was wrong. And I would just feed it back in and say, no, it's not drawing this edge. And it would say, oh, I'm sorry. And then it would do something else. And that was wrong too. And 2 hours later, I had perfect code that would have taken me a month to write myself. So I think just to my own experience, to Andrew's point, it's wrong, and then you talk to it, and then it fixes a little bit, and then you talk to it some more, and I had to stop the conversation and restarted a new conversation because I was out of it was getting long. What I didn't do is this thing that I'm learning today about keeping track of my prompts so that I can put them all in one long prompt, or maybe ask it what's a good prompt to start the conversation over on another window. Those are the kinds of tricks that I'm learning today from this conversation. But Rob, does that sound reasonable to you? That it's largely wrong, but it still actually helps you make very rapid progress when you just continue interacting with it.
That's right. We mathematicians are allergic to mistakes, rightly so. And it takes a little bit of readjusting getting comfortable with a fantastically industrious assistant who you always need to tell them to double check, second guess, make sure.
And with coding problems, especially if you know what the outcome's supposed to be and you can very quickly interrogate it and see if it got the code right or wrong. That's somehow much easier. Or if you wanted to text something and have it look nice, you immediately have the answer, as opposed to it gives you a proof and it gives you, 30 pages of some argument that it spat out.
Once again, sorry for interruption, but well, based on my experience, and I tested extensively, mostly on this GPT family page or yes, professional, and this is, as long as the problem is not too complicated and close to standard, it's amazing. It's it's extraordinary. But once you step out of standardized question, I haven't seen any good code. I don't know anybody, and maybe you can prove me wrong, but I don't know anybody who actually wrote anything professional in this. So, well, prove me wrong.
Yeah. So we just have a few more minutes. I want to make sure we get to more questions. There's another question about Rob, I don't know if you want to take this one, about whether this new DeepSeek, if it's any good at lean. I don't know if you've played around with lean at all, but maybe you can give us just your general philosophy on whether you think formalization is an important component of using these systems.
Yeah, that's the big gap in what we've been talking about today, and is really one of the most exciting things that AI is going to be good for in mathematics, is formalization. I haven't mentioned that just because the rest of the zeitgeist in the math community has really been focused on that. This is what Terry Tao is talking about. This is what other people are talking about. I have been interested in moving in a orthogonal direction to see what we can do outside of the formalization direction, just working with how good are these language models at coming up with creative ideas, interesting conjectures, interesting proofs, and then the production phase of it. So you have to talk to someone else about the nitty-gritty on how well these things work with lean.
Does it seem to you that like when people do benchmarks and they start evaluating these AI systems on, this class of problems or that class of problems, where we wanted to just be given a natural language question and either using it lean or not in natural language, whatever the structure of the game is, it's supposed to find a complete answer. And it sounds, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, like what you're saying is that's the wrong metric by which to measure the success of these systems, and that they can be very, very useful to a mathematician, even if they don't one-shot the answer.
Agreed. Not only do I think it's very, very useful to us as, traditional academic research mathematicians, I think this is going to be really amazingly useful to people who are, for one reason or another, excluded from the, how should we say, priesthood of academic mathematics. There are all kinds of people who are really good at mathematics, have had good training in mathematics, but for one reason or another did not get a job in academia and would like to continue doing mathematics. Not having access to good PhD students, not having access to colleagues is a real impediment for someone working on their own. I think the barriers, the impediments are lowering rapidly with AI. And although the job market in academia is bad, has always been bad, probably will continue to be bad, I'm actually really optimistic about growth in research mathematics.
Do you think there's an upcoming, there was sort of a golden era, I don't know, in the Fermat was not a professional mathematician and so on, right? There's a long history of independent mathematics, which is basically in the 20th century died out. I mean, there's very, very few people who did not have a PhD in mathematics who contributed a significant mathematical discovery. And you see that trend reversing, potentially.
I would love to see that trend reverse.
Yeah, more hands on deck, right? We need all the manpower we can get. Fascinating. We just have time for one quick question. There's a question about whether the recording will be available. Yes, we will put it on the website. And then do you have other tips on how to correct the model when it goes wrong, other than say, this is the part that went wrong?
So I will say that most of my mathematical conversations in Claude or in ChatGPT are less about working on a particular proof and more just trying to generate ideas, going back and forth. And I have a bunch of custom commands that are built into my ChatGPT or my Claude instance. In each of these, you can do what are called custom instructions that just get prepended to any conversation you have.
And this is the project when you
This
use
is
the
not a project. You don't need a project for this. You could just set custom instructions. It's in the settings. And what I have is a built-in CLI or command line interface where I give it slash commands, kind of like LaTeX commands, slash and then some word. And I'll do slash math when I'm wanting to have a conversation about math. And I tell it, you got to be really careful. I want you to be precise, et cetera, et cetera. One of my commands is slash ORLY, which is, oh, really? And whenever I'm having a conversation and I type back, oh, really? Then it is triggered to go back and either find a mistake in what you were just saying or go step by step and convince me that what you said is correct. This is great for my students. This is great for me when I'm having a math conversation. It keeps me on my toes. I got to watch and make sure that it's being correct. And if I suspect an error, it's just one little command. And okay, you got to go back and convince me or find the mistake and fix it.
And that seems to work well in practice.
It really does. And in course assistants that I build for my students for their classes, that's a really great command because it trains them to be skeptical.
Fascinating. Did you just discover these on your own, or did you find these somewhere? Or should I ask Claude, what's a good way to set up some of these, what do you call them, CLIs?
Yeah, ask your favorite chat how to set that up. I get most of my ideas just playing around.
That's great. That's great. Well, we're at the end of our time. Let me see if there's one last question. How many math programs use entrance tests? How will AI affect this, given that applicants can cheat using AI? Or will this, will we go back to doing everything on pen and paper? And do you have anything you want to say about that, especially as the dean of university?
Or should we rather use rethink these entrance tests and encourage using AI?
There are so many issues that come up when we start talking about AI in education, especially technical education, but also in the humanities and social sciences as well. That is the subject for a whole nother hour. Not going to be able to answer that one here.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and to all of you, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again sometime soon.
Thank you much.
Thank you.